a lot of people are going to be thinking like, what are the human things? What are the ways that we can contribute? Like, what does the human thing actually mean? And I think being able to create infrastructure, especially in a decentralized and a community-driven way, allows people to really find shelter in these spaces to regenerate themselves and also the places around them.
Hi, and welcome to the Seek Sustainable Japan podcast. I'm JJWalsh, your host here in Hiroshima, Japan. And in this episode, I have the chance to talk with the amazing Michelle Huang, who is an artist. She calls herself a creative-technologist. So she finds interesting intersections of art projects, but she's also really innovative in terms of how to reuse the vacant houses, Akiya, in Japan. And she has started something called the Akiya Collective. And so we're talking about her event coming up in April, where she's welcoming people to stay for a month, enjoy the local culture, engage with local people, and do really innovative art projects which relate to rural living and reusing old houses in Japan. She is coming at a lot of these issues from a very different perspective, which is very refreshing. And she is multi-talented, even a DJ. So you're hearing the intro and outro music on SoundCloud. I'll put all the important and related links below, as usual. You can always find me if you search JJWalsh Japan. Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is Seek Sustainable Japan. I'm JJWalsh in Hiroshima, and today joined by the amazing Michelle Huang. Are you in Nagano today?
I'm actually in Tokyo for a couple days before Nagano, but Nagano is usually where I'm based.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Well, Michelle, you and I met at the Minka Summit years ago, and I was so interested in what you were doing. You had an interesting conversation about the tech and art intersections with Akiya, the abandoned houses in Japan. How did this passion for getting involved with the Akiya and the vacant houses in Japan, where did that come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So during my creative sabbatical during COVID, basically when everyone was on their journeys for exploration, mine took me to Taiwan, where I spent basically a year figuring out exactly, hey, like I've been doing like the normal default route for some time. What happens when I just let my mind stay still? So during that time, I went on a 10-day silent meditation retreat and basically took a lot of time to explore a lot of my other interests, which at that time was related to LED art, neurofeedback, and embodied spaces. And of course, during that time, that led me to make a lot of different art installations in my room. I was doing the neurofeedback kind of like explorations with this meditation cube, so turning my brainwaves into interactive art pieces. And I turned my room into this sort of like spaceship looking thing. Oh, thank you so much for putting that up. Yeah, that one's a white cube, and basically when your mind goes into more meditative states, the cube turns from a white to a pulsing blue over time. And so what I was really interested in was the interaction between inner worlds and external worlds, and started doing a little bit more research around spaces and how they can embody different facets of what we're interested in, and how they can essentially become a co-facilitator in exploring our own interests, and also the collective interests of the people that help make it. And so that took me to Akiya, where I was interested in allowing for more houses that weren't being used into becoming more canvases, and was talking to a couple of friends who had recently purchased Akiya, and was saying, hey, like what happens if we are able to turn these empty homes into art installations, creative residencies, community spaces. And, you know, this project really started with a group chat. and eventually became something that we open sourced, recruited thousands of people in our community and hundreds of volunteers over time. And now it's really a community driven and led project.
It's so cool. And as you know, and many people watching know, there's such a crazy uh, amount of vacant homes, which are still good value, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you actually get a discount on buying the land because they think the house is no value. So creating
Mm-hmm.
value and bringing art and creativity and supporting local communities is all very important right now, and such a great asset for Japan. Whereas most of the world has not enough housing, right? We have the opposite
Yes.
problem here.
Exactly. And I found this to be a really interesting juxtaposition because I grew up in the States. And in the States, it's like there's so much scarcity. And especially being in places like New York and San Francisco for some time, um, that is the one of the most scarce things that I think are basically like a huge psychological burden, especially when it comes to emerging artists or people who want to take sabbaticals or people that are like, let me, like, I want to explore my own interests, but I'm stuck to paying rent. I'm stuck to this 20-30 year old mortgage that, like, I have to pay off. I stay in my job. So really a lot of this project is related to exploring alternate alternate lifestyles, and a form of regeneration through environment and built environment and also self. And I do have this thesis where the more that we're able to contribute to society, I think that's one of the, like, there's a whole meaning crisis happening right now, especially with AI, emerging tech, and all that kind of stuff. And it really is a double-edged sword in the sense that while there's a lot of use cases for productivity, there's also um, a lot of kind of discourse around how we take meaning from work and how we're able to create meaning in our lives that are outside of work or productivity. And I think there's probably going to be a phase where a lot of people are going to be thinking, like, what are the human things, what are the ways that we can contribute, like, what does the human thing actually mean? And I think being able to create infrastructure, especially in a decentralized and a community driven way, allows people to really find shelter in these spaces, to regenerate themselves and also the places around them.
I love that idea. And it's so important. It's not just about reusing these houses. It's about building better communities. It's about being better people, right? And
Yeah,
interacting with
exactly.
other people who want to make connections and want to have those meaningful interactions, right?
Absolutely. I think so. There's this Paul Graham essay that I read a couple years ago, but I always keep coming back to, around how every city and every place has a message. So when you go to New York, spend enough time there, the message is oftentimes you got to be more rich. You go to San Francisco, the message is you got to be more powerful. In Boston, the message, it's a college town, and so the message is you have to be smarter. And in Japan, and especially rural Japan, the message I get is you have to be a better neighbor. And I think having like kind of a community spirit where you're around these places, and the essential, like, capital or the ethos there that people are trying to be is, how do you become a better community member, participant? And I think the more that we have spaces like this, like, I think the real technology is like connection. Like, I think that's kind of the ultimate form. And I think a lot of things, and a lot of apps and new innovation, kind of like, it's always for connection, but oftentimes it's very deeply abstracted or deeply embedded away from, like maybe like five derivatives away. And it's like you've abstracted that so much away that like it's kind of missing the point sometimes. But I think one of the things that was really refreshing, especially coming from a tech background into rural Japan, was like, people really care about people here. Like, it's not about connection through like a couple button presses. It's about connecting through, bringing a cabbage that you grew in your backyard to your neighbor and being like, hey, like, I wanted to share this with you, and feeling like, oh wow, like I'm such a lucky recipient of this gift. Let me make some food from it and share some of it back. And that's really the way that we've established relationships through a lot of our neighbors.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about where you chose, because you traveled all over Japan. You looked
Yeah.
at vacant houses everywhere, but
Yeah.
you kind of chose this area of Nagano, which you can see here. It's only 90 minutes away from
Mhm.
Tokyo. Beautiful mountain, rural countryside area. How did you end up choosing Komoro?
Yeah, it's interesting because it really came from a feeling, and I remember at Minka Summit, you know, when you talk to people and how they chose their IKEA, a lot of times people say that the Kominka or the Kia chose them. So yeah, that's Asama-san. Beautiful views of Komoro. That's our backyard. We had a carpenter, Mike, actually, who's a community volunteer, build a tea house like entirely from tree logs over the course of 1 month. And it was like this guy was like, I was like, this is true craftsmanship right there. But Komoro was really a feeling. We scoured Akias and places through a lot of different regions. And actually, our first methodology was to find the perfect home. It's like, okay, like we went on the IKEA banks, we had like volunteers, we had like weekly chats where like we would go on IKEA banks and try to find a house that like, you know, looked good or had good structure or had, you know, room for activities. And that eventually actually became a kind of like a second or third point to finding like a community that we felt really comfortable in and a community that felt like really excited to have a project there. So we ended up hosting a month or two long residencies in different places in rural Japan, and we ended up really connecting with the community in Komoro. Like we went and like the city hall was really excited to have us there. They introduced us to this house that we ended up purchasing, and they also introduced us to a rented space nearby so we could live there while we were renovating the purchased house. They introduced us to like a car salesman that was like, oh, you know, we can sell you vehicles as well. Like they really hooked it up, and so like within a week we had all the things that we needed, and we're like, this community really feels warm and really excited to have us here, and we want to do something, there. But to be honest, like the first day that I visited Komoro, I felt like so like a deep sense of groundedness, and a deep sense of wanting to contribute to the area around. So we're like, let's just find a place here.
That's amazing. I'm showing pictures from your website, akiyacollective.org.
Hmm.
And you've been sharing all the information about how you find the house, what are the other resources out there, also step by step what you're doing with the renovations.
Hmm.
It's an amazing project. And what a great idea to get artists and creatives and locals all together. And you're actually opening up the area in spring and inviting people to join you and learn hands on,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really, really excited to first spring. This is going to be our first community event, where we've usually, over the past year, we've done build weeks. So we've brought in volunteers from everywhere around the world, including around also local Japan. And we basically have done a bunch of different projects, from building art installations for Burning Man Japan, to creating 3D printed artifacts, to doing renovation and demolition. So on that photo, actually, with the shoji doors, you can see that we actually took abandoned artifacts from the home and created them into installations. So this one was a project for Burning Man Japan, um, whose tradition is actually to take installations and burn them at the end. And so this was like a last homage or last kind of like offering from the IKEA, before a lot of the resources went down to the ground again. So it was a really cathartic experience. So we've been doing a bunch of tinkering, and this is the first time where we're doing we're launching a residency around ontological design, and doing a couple of different events related to hacking nights, ikebana, kaiseki, like make your own sushi. Like there's so many different kinds of things that we're hoping to offer and share with the community, and ultimately actually also recruit people to purchase Akiya, to see Komoro, see what it's like, and create a starting community there. So we've had actually a couple people. Actually, just a couple months ago, 2 people just closed on houses. They were volunteers that came during the build weeks in the previous year, and they loved the project and the community so much that they're like, I'm gonna actually like buy property here to be part of this like growing community. So they're starting. I think there's 4 houses now that we have access to in the area. They're owned by community members, and it's been less than a year actually since we purchased the home. So I'm really excited to see more people explore Komoro, revitalize it, and I mean it's already like popping. But of course, having more people in and having a vibrant community is something that we'd love to help convert.
It's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things people can expect if they come for the event. So it's mostly in April, is that right?
Yeah,
Lots of dates in
exactly.
April.
Lots of dates in
Eh,
April. We have a couple of weeks in May as well. So our carpenter is coming back, and we finished probably 80% of the tea house during the first day, and then the second day, he's actually right now building temples in Nepal. So he's like legit, and so he's coming back, and we're doing like a tile workshop where we're finishing up the tiles of the home. So you can see that it's actually made of entirely local wood and forestry. We made friends with a farmer who owns a bunch of forest plots. So yeah, those are the tree logs, and he's trained using traditional Japanese joinery techniques with his master, and so
this blew me away, right? To watch
yeah.
your on your Instagram, and then
Uh-huh.
how this is something I love about traditional Japanese
Mm-hmm.
architecture and building design, to fit the shape of the stone that keeps it stable with the shape of the
Mm-hmm.
wood as you put it
Yeah.
on. And you guys were doing that as part of like an interactive workshop. How amazing is that?
Yeah, it's really exciting, and we want to also share that with the broader community. So we're doing like a tile workshop. We're making more tiles, and kind of having this be an open hand invitation for anyone who's interested in doing these sort of workshops, as well as exploring Komoro.
That's so good. I showed some of the pictures earlier of Komodo. This is the local
Hmm.
onsen, amazing views of the mountains as you have a
Yeah.
soak. April, you're expecting like sakura cherry blossom season in April,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then
exactly. There's
one one of
a
the
beautiful castle
activities as
town.
well is hiking up
Yes.
to Mount Asama. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct. All the shenanigans that we're really excited that we do actually pretty often, and wanting to just allow people to have a taste of what local living is like.
That's amazing. You also, as a lot of people who take over the old houses, they
Hmm.
always have to fight back the bamboo. Bamboo is something that really becomes invasive, and it becomes
Uh-huh.
your first project is trying to fight back the bamboo. And then it
Yeah.
also supports your neighbors. Like everybody who moves into rural Japan always talks about the bamboo.
Hmm.
And you were helping local artists or local people to harvest the bamboo, so you're making use of it. You're also doing really interesting art projects with the bamboo, right? Talk a
Hmm.
little bit about what you've been doing with bamboo. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was actually during the time of Burning Man Japan. In that photo, we had one of the organizers of Burning Man Japan. He was doing center camp, and he was on the hunt for bamboo. And at that point, we had already harvested a lot of bamboo from our backyard, and also in our neighbor's backyard, who actually like so our neighbor owns this plot of land, and he's basically like fighting against the bamboo for years, and now it's like encroaching more and more onto his property. And so we're like, hey, like we're actually building a star dome for our center camp for Burning Man Japan. Like that's going to be the structure. And Subasa, who's the organizer, you can see him on the right hand side of the photo, excellent human being, was like we typing in the Discord like where can we find bamboo, and we're like we got the place for you, like you should come through and you should stay here for a bit, and let's do some prototyping with the dome. So this is one of our early prototypes, actually, with some of the bamboo that we found in our backyard. This one was a kind of small scale version of it, we ended up changing the shape quite a bit. But of course, like very big fan of using organic materials to create art pieces, art installations that can then be recycled back into the earth.
It's amazing. And bamboo is such a regenerative, it's a grass. It
Mm-hmm.
grows so fast.
Yes.
It's strong, it's flexible. It has so many uses practically. Used to be
Mm-hmm.
used for everything in Japan in olden days and then not. So when it stopped being used, it just became invasive and everywhere. But
Yeah.
if you can make art out of it and reuse it for different projects, it's such a great resource here, right?
Absolutely, and I think in certain parts of the world, they actually use it for construction scaffolding because it's stronger than steel, especially taking into account its flexibility and durability. So yeah, I feel like it's such a underutilized resource, and while we're constantly turning in manufacturing to create scaffolding and creating like other forms, why not look in our backyard and try to reutilize some of those objects?
Absolutely. And also reusing a lot of the things that were left in the house as artists and
Mm-hmm.
creatives, like thinking of it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
This object was left. Of course, some of them just has value. So you're thinking of passing it on as a vintage kind of auction as part of your
Mm-hmm.
events or when people visit. But there's some things that kind of lost the interest, but you can recreate it with a new idea as artists and creatives. I love that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's so much remixing, and I think especially one of the things that I experience as an artist is like sometimes overwhelmed from the amount of things that I could do or create. But I think going to a Akiya and having kind of prompting and a creative container for, hey, like we have these items, what can we do creatively with these items that allow them to kind of like have like a life form again. There's this term in Japanese, I think it's called tsukugomi, that allows for people to experience. It's the idea that artifacts that aren't touched for a very long period of time, maybe 100 years, have this spirit, and sometimes the spirits are wandering or they're lost or they're not sure what to do. But this is kind of like a project that allows for us to honor that and allow for these objects that were so preciously held that has like their own stories and rituals and life forms that they're a part of to at least be surfaced again.
I love that. We also bought an old 60-year-old house, and when we bought it, it
Mm-hmm.
was just full of things.
Yes.
We had made a deal with the recycle company, and they were going to come. They said, "You got 2 hours, and then we're going to take it all." So we invited people. We said,
Wow.
"Come in and get the dishes," from a local shop. She's starting a restaurant. Like, just get people who can use it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you found similar things. Here you are surrounded by lots and lots of beautifully packaged dishes, which I'm sure you
Yes.
found everywhere, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think this house was actually used as a storage house from the owner. We were chatting with the owner during the purchase, and he actually has another property nearby in Komoro. So I think a lot of the things that they weren't using, they had put in this house. So like, first walked in the house, it was like stuff to like shoulder level, basically, which is maybe similar to the experience that you had as well. But it was we had an option to purchase the house basically with everything cleaned out, and we're like, no, like we want to see what life, like under all these objects. I think it's just like like we felt like it was really sad to just have all these objects be default discarded and thrown away, when they had so much potential for stories, use cases, reuse, recycling. So yeah, we ended up wanting to go through all the artifacts and either like honor them once more and throw them away, or to keep them for use at a later date.
I love it. And Benton Homestead, Evan and Danny, who've taken over old houses, made guest houses,
Hmm.
they both have that really artistic view. They have a Mujin shop. You know what those are? Like the no
Oh.
staff shops. and then
Yes.
they're selling some of the vintage items in their always open, honor system shop. And that's
Mhm.
another great idea, right? And then the local people come
Yes.
around, and then visitors will cycle by and check it out, so there's
Mhm.
so many great ways to kind of honor the value of these discarded or left items, right? It's
Mhm.
just so exciting to see all this creativity come in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially in kind of like the broader context, there's so many things like, fast fashion or like one use, objects, and that really contributes to waste, and the amount of like kind of like cheap, flimsy things. And we found that especially the furniture in the home, like this house is around 80 years old, and a lot of the furniture I think was bought, maybe a decade or 2 decades in the property. And just comparing kind of like the plastic things that we use on a day-to-day versus the furniture that has still stayed in pretty decent quality, especially even after 5 decades, right? 5 or 6 decades, two of which were probably just not used at all. You can kind of like we've been doing furniture reverberation as well, where we're like sanding and staining and adding oil to original products, and we're like, wow, like really have a deep respect for the craftsmanship that came in earlier times. So I do feel like through this project, we as a community has really felt like this is sort of like an active dissent against a lot of the contemporary trends that are happening, and we want to invite more people in to experience this, and place seeds for them to bring back into their lives, or even here in Komoro, where they can root back into, hey, these are like intentional ways of interacting with the life force of the objects around us, instead of just like, oh, this is just a commodity, let's throw it away after we finish using it.
Yeah. Just kind of rethinking that idea of buy or make to waste, and
Yeah.
thinking of it more as a circular, like how can we reuse what we already have? We have
Hmm.
value for things which are already there. Like how can we just redefine that for ourselves? And then within your community, the more people take on the other houses, the more collaboration you're doing, you're going to start
Hmm.
to see more and more of this kind of, it's almost like a barter system. You help me,
Yeah.
I help you. It's less about money. Some people give
Hmm.
you vegetables. So maybe, oh, would you like this? I see that you need that. Like it becomes like a different kind of very positive connection between people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think like it's really interesting because I've started to really love some of the inconveniences of being in rural Japan, because it allows for connection. So for example, like going to a cafe, like maybe there's maybe like instead of having like a Wi-Fi plaque where you can go like, okay, like, well, I'm gonna go and like type in, you have to actually ask someone. But in asking someone is the heart of like, this is an opportunity for connection. You can ask them for the Wi-Fi. Hey, how long have you been here? Do you live in this town? And so I think, and even for even like trash in rural Japan, and sorting it out, um, like there's not. I didn't initially actually find any instructions around like, hey, this is where you put the trash, or this, like it was like, you had to like either dig or know someone, and a lot of times people just know someone. And so I had a lot of help from my neighbors coming in, to Komoro, and living like, hey, like where do you put the trash? Like where do I find resources to do this? But over time, like being able to like need your neighbors and ask for help, or also return help in return, allows people to really build connections. And I think that's really how people used to live, and now it's like people can go on Google, search up the things, not have to interact with anyone. Like you have these restaurants where you can go in and order food, eat your food, pay for food without interacting with a single person. But I think it's like so much of the world now, I think, is lonely. And I think that it's because we use a lot of like buttons and technology to do things faster, but not necessarily with each other. So it's like I think being in the countryside has really taught me a lot about interdependence, and allowing yourself to need others, and kind of resisting that hyper independent mentality where it's like you're not more strong because you can do everything yourself, but you're stronger because you're connected in this like very large net, and fabric of humanity, and that's kind of what we need to remember every once in a while.
I love that. Now you can't make use of everything, of course. You found 120 old futons that you had to deal with.
Oh
That
yeah,
is,
oh yeah.
there's some that you just have to throw away. And I bet that was
Yep.
such a pain, heavy, but
Hmm.
also what do you do with old futons? That would have taken some research, right?
Yeah, exactly. We were like jokingly naming the house Futon House, initially, because that was the first thing we did when we purchased a house. We like went in and we saw like stacks of futon in every room, and we're like, we should count how many there is because that would be like an interesting statistic. But yeah, we brought out 120 futons. Actually, we found more, a little bit later, so the number actually might be a little bit more than that. So pretty absurd.
That's
I
crazy.
think
And it's
though
quite
with
a big house, too, right?
yeah, exactly. So it's about, seven individual rooms, including some on the top floor that were like fake rooms with fake walls that we ended up demolishing to make way for the Kominka, structure on top. But yeah, pretty large house, with a lot of space for stuff. And I actually think that like we could have, found use cases for everything, and it was like really hard to just throw things away to make the space clear. But this is the first community space that we have in Komoro, and if other people acquire Akiya, we actually live on the street called Akiya Street that the neighbors kind of endearingly call because it's a house that's full of like abandoned homes. But as people start acquiring properties on the street, the house, the neighborhood that feels like it's like the broken window theory where it's like one broken window makes people like want to be like, oh, like do we really want to take care of the space, and then kind of like, move out over time. But I think like having this like one house that is a semi-public community space allows for other people that actually is, being transformed into makerspace, allows for people to renovate their homes, take artifacts, like let's say they do find a lot of futons, in their house. Maybe we can even clean them, make a tapestry, like turn it into like a big blanket. Like there's so many ideas, but now we have a space that we can use to have, community projects, and to build. So hopefully for the next houses, we'll be able to find more use cases for those items instead of having to throw away a lot, that we had to end up doing.
Absolutely. You mentioned about finding these amazing beams underneath the ceiling. This is
Oh
something
yeah.
we found in our house. This is something a lot of
Oh my
people
gosh.
who get the old houses say, and that is so exciting when you take off the false ceiling
Hmm.
and you're like, oh my God, it must have been an amazing find, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, taking off the first ceiling tile, and being like, wait, there's so much. And part of that was actually exposed when we first toured the house. Yeah, that is the wood that we ended up removing. And we're like, wow, like why did people cover up this beautiful architecture? Like this is I mean, for practical use cases, we asked the owner, they were having kids, and so they started making separate rooms for the kids for privacy. So totally understand. But we were like, oh my gosh, like it was like our architect was saying that as we were clearing out the artifacts and taking down the beams, he was like, the house can take a breath of fresh air again. And that really stood out to me.
That's beautiful. I remember the builder saying something similar to us, and he's like, "You're really
Mm-hmm.
lucky. It's been built in traditional ways because over the years, we've had many earthquakes, and it's just shifted, but it
Yeah.
didn't break. And if it was a new build, it would have broken." And so there is so
Yep.
much value in that old style, everything fitted
Hmm.
together without nails or concrete. And your house was the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Kuminka style, where like the house kind of like dances with the ground. And I think this kind of really goes to show that, kind of living in a house like this is living inside an art installation and art artifact where people like really understood the movements of the earth and how wood worked and how the house could move on top of it, versus kind of like a lot of modular prefabs that you see like literally being printed and shipped and like everything looks the same. It's like what happens to, you know, like intentionality when people really pour their heart and soul into something, and you can see that it stays persistent over time, because there's so much effort and care that's being put in these buildings. And a lot of our project is to respect, honor, and to share this sort of ethos with the rest of the world.
I love that. I was reading that about your on your, what do you call it? Not the manifesto for the
Yeah.
Akiya collection, right? And then you talk
Hmm.
about this house was here before us. The land definitely, it's
Hmm.
gonna exist after us. So it's
Hmm.
that kind of, we're just trying to make it purposeful while we're
Yeah.
here with an idea. We want to make it better in the future. I That's a very sustainable focused philosophy and such a beautiful idea, but also great connections to traditional Japan. How old
Mm-hmm.
carpenters used to cut down a tree and say, I promise to use it as long as you've been alive, and
Yeah.
planting trees with the idea to use them in 300 years. Right? That
Hmm.
that is really a deep part of Japanese culture, which needs to be brought back as well, right? Respect for nature, thinking of
Hmm.
your place in the universe. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also one of the reasons why we ended up choosing Japan too, is because Japan is really the only modern nation that still practices indigenous cosmologies from like a societal level. Like there is a god or a spirit in everything. You'll see shrines built next to kindergartens, you know, like there's ambient like reverence. I think that I really feel, it's like you go to the forest, it's like there's god of the trees, there's god of the rivers. And I think that's really beautiful, and it allows people to just really as a byproduct treat things with care, because like everything is an entity, everything has god in it. And so I think that really has extended to the craftsmanship here, which I feel like is really not because people want to be famous or make money, but because they really find themselves in it as they grow deeper in their crafts over, you know, decades of their life. And I think that's really the approach I have for my art practice as well, where it's like, how do you find yourself in more things, and how does that open up more beauty and love to the rest of the world?
That's amazing. When I look at your project and how you're trying to rebuild this beautiful village in Nagano in the mountains, it really reminds me of Woven City, which everybody's looking at. Woven
Mm-hmm.
City for Japan. Toyota's making a new high tech, brand new, AI generated, very clean, like vision of the future. But to be honest, Michelle, what you are doing, reusing what is already there, which needs to be reused, and the community needs to come back, and adding tech. This is a much more sustainable future clean town vision in terms of what we really have already and what we can just revamp, right? Isn't it? It's a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I think technology should ultimately be used for connection. It shouldn't, you know, like we were talking about earlier in this conversation, like there's so many levels of abstraction. But ultimately, I think there's so much connective power in technology. And I remain an optimist due to just like um, uh, due to spiritual I think reasons. That it's like you have to kind of maintain a sense of optimism, or else like everything is like, you know, it becomes more dystopic. And the more you look at dystopia, I think it like warps in anyways. I've been down that route as well, but I think maintaining a healthy sense of optimism for the things that we can do, but of course putting humans in connection at the center of it, I think is really of utmost importance. And what we intend to do with this project as well is to allow it to become a smoke signal. So the people who are looking for projects like this are able to find us, and kind of like, you know, be like, oh, like where are my people? Like, hey, like let's follow the smoke signal. So we can kind of create something together.
I love that. And I love that it kind of like we met at the Minka Summit. A lot of
Hmm.
people went to the Minka Summit who want to reuse these beautiful old houses, who want to live in rural areas. But the community and the ideas that you're creating there definitely can be applied to other parts of Japan as well. So what you're
Definitely.
creating is like a model town of how to reuse old houses and bring the art and creativity and even bring the tech into it, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the technology component, I mean, we do hacking, but I think in terms of being able to spread awareness about the situation through installations or even open sourcing all of the things that we do, ranging from, hey, these are the renovations that we've done versus like, hey, like when you move into a town, you should introduce yourself and bring gifts, small gifts to the neighbors. Like for example, when I moved in, we brought like tissue paper and like washcloths. And in America, it's like the gifts are I feel like they feel louder, but I think it's not necessarily something that people would use, right? So I think like something that is practical, and learning a lot of the things that we have in terms of integrating well into the community around us is something that I think is such a necessary part. Like when you buy an Akiya, it's not like you just buy a house. You're part of the community now. So being able to allow for people to realize that there's like such a large integration part necessary to live in Japan, instead of like the headline like cheap houses, like we bought a house for $50. It's like, yeah, like of course people would want that because real estate is scarce in other parts of the world. But of course, like to be able to feel like really part of the town and to allow for someone's experience to feel worthwhile, and net positive, right, for both that person and also for the town. There's so many things that I think are implied or not really talked about, or documented in a broader sense. So a lot of the technology we do is really open sourcing our learnings, and hopefully this can be helpful for people that are not only in Japan, but we've actually had people reach out to us from Mexico, like Korea, Thailand, India, who are also dealing with revitalization crises, with villages disappearing, and trying to import this model and essentially fork it to places where we can allow for a general structure for human flourishing, to be kind of to be circulated and to be reused. And of course, it's like it's all free because we don't want to gatekeep any of this information.
I love it. And I love how you're doing things open source. You're sharing all your findings and learnings along the way. And I checked from your Akiya Collective
Hmm.
website. I found the Minka listings. And so having a good local community who's also
Hmm.
helping to publicize which houses are available. Some of the houses were 2 million yen, some of them were 20 million yen. So there's a
Hmm.
real range of usable houses in your area. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think there's so many homes that, for example, aren't listed on these Akiya banks. Akiya banks have a lot, like it's a great starting resource, but I think the best way to actually find homes is to go to communities, live there for a while, make friends with the locals, inquire about houses that, may be abandoned or the owner is thinking about selling. And I think that's kind of where, people would find the best homes anyway. But there's so much undocumented stuff, and there's so much like there's worlds, infinite worlds outside of computers, and apart from like what is online. And I think having people that are willing stewards of different communities and different neighborhoods, be a soft landing pad for people who want to visit the area, I think is really necessary for integration and for also discovery.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of the creative things people can do if they come in April.
Mm.
Uh, Somebody who came to your sessions last year wrote a beautiful Google review. What makes this community special to me is the creativity, communal living, how it intertwines naturally. Residents are encouraged to explore their artistic passion and sense of wonder while sharing in the daily rhythms of life, cooking,
Mm.
cleaning, and decorating to keep the space dynamic and vibrant. beautiful. And so people
Hmm.
can choose to come for a week or a month. How
Hmm.
can people get involved? Can you give us a little overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in Komoro, we have like I guess like a both digital and physical presence that people can choose to be involved with. We have had volunteers, fly in to be part of Build Weeks on site, and of course, as we continue to do renovation and uplevel the house in terms of artistic and also structural considerations, we'll continue to host Build Weeks so people can sign up for those and be part of the community in person, which I think is like really where the culture is like very embodied. But of course, people don't necessarily always have the means to fly all the way to Japan. And we have an online community that is active. So we have probably around 1,000 across our mediums where people are engaging and sharing insights around house renovations, around their Akiyas or their Kuminkas in different parts of Japan or even around the world, and people share ideas, insights, and also their artistic exploration. So we've held like book clubs, we've held talks around new models of human flourishing. So there is a community of people that are interested in exploring alternative living and also wanting to explore different projects. And of course, if there's someone who's like very excited about a project and wants to bring it to Komoro, this organization allows for this to happen and allow people to run their own residencies within their makerspace as well. So there's a both online and physical component. I think tangibly the next steps that people could take to become more involved in the community is to, if they're in Japan, attend our event in April in Komoro, which you can find on our website, or join our Discord and be a participant in the online conversations. And yeah, maybe someone can find useful gems from the individuals that comprise of our Discord as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A great comment on YouTube from Elemental Fitness Lab. Thanks for joining. Yep, we live in rural area and the vast
Mm,
number of homes are not listed on real estate sites, especially Akiya banks. A lot of people talk about this, how some Akiya banks better than others at updating, at giving information. But the real key is to come and stay and hear the information from locals once you kind of develop a level of trust and then you
mhm.
hear about the better places. I've heard that so many times. Was that true for
Yeah,
you guys too?
yeah, absolutely. And a very large reason around why we ended up running residencies to be like, okay, we're gonna rent an IKEA, or find someone in our community that has an IKEA for us to just sublet for a while, and just talk to people. Just talk to people there. Go on walks and see what houses look like IKEAs, and try to talk to the city hall or even some locals and inquire around the status of this home. And I think there's almost like I feel like for community first projects and ones that are like have like a decentralized model, I think it's especially if there are people in different towns that want people to move in. I think the work that they can do is to allow these IKEAs to be surfaced and compiled in different databases. So we're currently compiling a list of stewards and a list of databases for people to share the IKEAs and kind of offer that like, hey, like we exist here and like we want more people to move here. We're happy to be a resource for someone to get to know, and of course find homes that have good bones, and having a resource around like, hey, this is where you throw away trash. Like that for me was like really game changing, because I was pretty confused, I think, in the first couple days. I was like, where do I do, like, how do
Absolutely.
I do
And
things?
it's
Yeah.
wonderful, Michelle. You are such an ambassador for the area. You know, like Ed Stratham, who's right outside Nozawa Onsen, he's an ambassador as well for his town,
Mm-hmm.
introducing the abandoned places or the places that are available, but also having places nearby. It sounds like in Komoro, where you can come and
Mm-hmm.
stay for a week and then get to know the area. That's
Yeah.
having guest houses or having places to stay is also a real key part of it, because you don't want to come in cold. and just buy a
Yeah.
place or do a day trip. You want to stay there for a week, right? And it sounds like
Hmm.
you've got that available in your area as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, so much of I think living or choosing a place to be is about feeling the rhythm of the environment around, and I think having a day trip or even a couple hours, people passing by is really not enough to have enough conviction to be like, this is where I want to buy a home and invest in, a greater chunk of my life to. So I think, yeah, being able to catch the rhythms of the place or really hear the music, and get along with the communities. Of course, like I think there are just so many different communities in Japan, and there's always a place for everyone. But being able to do the research and discover and to see what places actually fit, I think is like the part that really needs to be emphasized.
And not having to redo all the same work, right? Not
Oh
having to
yeah.
come in and do all that work. Like local
Hmm.
knowledge, people who've done the work for you can just get you that next step so you don't have to
Hmm.
start from scratch. That's huge, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. You said it really well.
Now, some of the really unique and very artistic things people can be a part of, hologram making. Now, this is something you've
Mhm,
done, and you will be leading workshops on it.
mhm.
Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for one of my other projects, I lead this media lab in Tokyo, and so these term experiments have kind of been a recent interest of mine that I'm working with a collaborator there, and basically I'm really interested in finding interfaces and discovering interfaces that allow for more embodiment or more like immersive feelings. So holograms is something that we've oftentimes seen in media as like, this is futuristic or sci-fi, or like this is immersive. And what my team is doing for the media lab right now, as a participant in the media lab, we're actually launching like we launched a new pilot cohort, and so of course I was like, I want to experience the cohort as well, not only as a director but as a participant as well. But me and my collaborator Ira are working on a digital terrarium. Actually, I think Ira has been part of the Minka Summits. He was the person who introduced me to this community as well. So I have him to thank as well for that. But
Very
we're working
cool.
on small worlds. I feel like the world's
Right.
always shrinking, but I think it also means that when that happens, like you're just working on aligned interest and you're meeting like similar people. So I'm like, you know convergence. But for this project specifically, we're creating a digital life that interacts with the real world through sensors. So we have a temperature, pressure sensor, a noise sensor, as well as a light sensor hooked on to this digital life that responds to real world interactions or in elements. And so it was really fun. The holograms are actually like very easy to do. I know they look a little complicated. The sensor part is a little requires a little bit more thought, but holograms are such a easy, fun way to have like a new interface that feels like it's one of the things that look like they're hard to do but are actually very easy. So I wanted to share that with some of the
That's
people
very
coming.
cool. Now, one of the projects you've done, which seems perfect for taking over abandoned houses, is making use of disused or unused spaces. And you did
Hmm.
this beautiful leafy nook little
Yeah.
area to boost creativity, is it? I love it.
Yeah, so this was we had a really really kind owner in Nishi-Izu, which is actually one of the places that we explored for our residencies. He was like a owner who connected us to local communities, focused on revitalization as well as new Akiya owners, and was like, you should talk to these people. And we basically rented his house for 2 months in Izu, and wanted to leave it in a better state than how we found it. And I remember the first time we were touring his house, he like opened this door and he's like, yeah, this is like there's a really awkward space here. That's a wall. It used to be the front doors, but since a highway was built after the house was, they closed off the doors that went basically directly to the like larger street, and created like a different side entrance. And so he's like, yeah, like we don't really know what to do with the space, but like I was like, I have an idea for you. What do you
That's
think about this?
great.
And so the residents at the time and I created this leafy nook installation to make the space a little bit more cozy, like a reading corner.
And you need that because quite often the design of old houses, you're like, what am I going to do with this little weird section? So I love that idea. And then kind of connected to Burning Man, I think you were doing LEL wire design
Yeah,
around the
yeah,
house, and
yeah.
that'll happen again this year, right?
Exactly. So we have electroluminescent wire, and for Burning Man, exactly. So this is like a very glowy wire that runs off of alternating current, and the wire can be bent into different shapes. And so we created a wisteria installation for Center Camp Burning Man. And then I was like, hey, so what are you guys going to do with the artifacts that we built? And they're like, oh, we're going to put it in storage. And we're like, can we just put it in storage at our house so it still gets used? And they're like, of course. During Komoro, we're doing like basically the EL wire wisteria installation and setting up again at our house before we bring it to Burning Man again the following year.
I love it. You're also doing cultural things like make your own sushi, learn
Mm-hmm.
how to do shogi,
Yeah.
but you also have hack nights, right? So the tech is still part of it.
Exactly. So I think the operational playbook and everything that we're open sourcing allows people to find Akiyas, buy Akiyas, renovate them, and we also, as part of the work that we're open sourcing, is how to design your own residency. And I imagine that every person who purchases Akiya will kind of like come in with their own culture, mentality, and things that they want to create, and things like what kinds of neighbors do I want to be around, what kind of people, like what kind of community. And I think what we're also building is this sort of like emergent handbook, or this handbook for emergent culture, like how do people rally, community members to come into a space and contribute to it. And so for this specific Akiya for Komoro, I consider myself like a hacker and tinker, like really at heart, and I want to bring more hackers and tinkers. And so a lot of this event is also related to like, hey, like these are the community members that have historically been attracted in my communities, and want to find each other, basically build cool things in rural Japan while making the ecosystem better. And so that's also why we're doing so much tech events for our April event, to recruit people like this to join our neighborhood.
I love it. I think at first when I heard you talking with Joy on the YouTube
Mm-hmm.
interview that you did, you were talking
Yeah.
also about like NFTs and blockchain and how can Akiya fit into that and stuff. You kind
Mm-hmm.
of getting away from that a bit and not quite focused on that right now. Is that right?
Yeah, I think a very large component that I found for DAOs and coordination tools is that a lot of them actually work online on trustless systems. But in terms of bringing the contributors, so kind of like as an overview for smart contracts, it's basically a tool or implementation for someone to do like a digital handshake. Essentially, what this means is like, let's say you're like it's kind of like a blockchain version of eBay, where like there is a kind of like a permissionless third party where someone has something that they want to sell, another person wants to buy it. Without eBay, you'd have to find someone, and one person would have to either send the money or ship it first. And so in those cases, a lot of times there's room for scam or room for people to not necessarily follow through on their promise and delivery. And so what smart contracts do is essentially like not necessarily only doing this with artifacts or shipping, but also with tasks and also projects. So if someone, takes on a task and they're saying like, hey, like I'm gonna, do XYZ thing, a smart contract enables for someone to get paid as soon as the task is done, of course, pending, the set of verifications. So a lot of coordination and projects to be done at a really rapid pace from a lot of anonymous users and community members that have like bounty boards. So it's a lot of like kind of like decentralized anonymity, but we found that a lot of it actually doesn't really convert into inviting people into your own home because trust is necessary in those types of community environments. But I do think that while we've shifted a little bit away from kind of like the smart contract, trustless agent system, there's still so much of DAOs, which is stands for decentralized autonomous organizations, and a lot of coordination tools that still do port over to what we're doing. So we still have a DAO ethos, meaning everything we do is like transparent, open source. Anyone can join and really contribute to things. And once they contribute, they have like a hand or invitation into doing the community, to being part of the community. And we're implementing systems like being able, like if someone contributes online, they earn stays at the home instead of having to pay like an Airbnb. So exploring alternate economies is still very much within our ethos. And instead of kind of like, I think like, there's been a lot of stigma. I still think like, as excited about community and human interactions as I am, I think there's still a lot of potential for governance tools, especially ones that are online, to unlock a lot of capacity that we have as humans to do the in-person thing or do the online thing and really understand how we are able to coordinate better. And so I think for the stuff that we're doing, we've shifted away from like decentralized finance, like NFTs, but instead want to implement something that kind of feel like they could still be on the blockchain, like releasing memberships, which we still plan to do, and allowing for the people who care about NFTs or care about crypto or Web3 or, like ledger-like tokens, to still have memberships that are built based off the blockchain. But for the people who still want to get involved that don't really care about, having tokens on the blockchain, we still want to reward them through our ecosystem and allow for the contributions to still be heard and rewarded. And so a lot of it is incentive design, and there's still going to be a blockchain component part, but that's not going to be the front and center piece of what we do in our organization.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting concept, and I've seen Not a Hotel selling their NFTs. Basically, it kind of works like a timeshare. It seems like you own a stay like with 37 people at this place. But what you're doing, it seems like more open source, more welcoming to new community who can always get involved. I saw that you're giving discounts for people who were volunteers the year before, right? Like, so you're building on that knowledge and then also encouraging people to run their own workshop if they come and stay for the month. So what you're doing seems so positive and so community driven, as well as, of course, making use of these value houses that are available, right? So really excited for everything you're doing. Thanks so much, Michelle, for joining today and telling us all about it. Thank you so much
for having me. Yeah, absolutely. Had a fantastic time talking about all varied sorts of topics, and really appreciate you taking the time and energy to have the conversation this morning. I had a lot of fun, and hopefully we can join in again to give more updates around the project as it continues to develop over time.
That would be great, and I would love to come out. I don't think I can come out for spring, but I've been reading that it's a lot less humid there in summer. So I might escape the humidity here and go up and see you in summer. That would be great.
Absolutely. You'd be so welcome. And Komoro is a fantastic place, so I'm sure you'll feel right at home.
Fantastic. Well, thanks everyone for watching. And if you missed it, and of course, watching the replay, you can still add your comments and questions. Michelle and I will make sure and respond to you. Michelle, good luck with everything. I hope the event goes really well this year. Excited for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll be posting on our socials, and for anyone interested, please feel free to reach out, and we'll loop you in and get you involved.
Awesome. All right. See you next time.
See you next time.